So I'm going to try to make a mix of a review and a discussion for my Universal Swords 1845 British Wilkinson Light Cavalry Saber. So this was not the untempered version, which is available on their website. Here, mine should be a regular version. However, I believe that the untempered version on their website may only be there because this particular sword, all of them weren't made very well. And maybe that's true for a lot of the Universal Swords, and maybe not. So, this particular sword is listed as an en9 carbon steel, which some of the Universal Swords are listed as 5160, and a commenter on the Sword Buyer's Guide forum informed me that Universal Swords has switched to the 5160, so I don't know what that means for their blades. However, I have a Valar Arms en9 sword, and it is nowhere near as good as my Valar Arms 5160 sword. There's a night and day difference. Now, I do have a sword that I'm fairly confident, and now I have actually experienced two swords from Windless Steelcrafts that the heat treat was bad. So I also purchased this short sword, this co-steel short sword with a nice peen, and one side of it, the blade, has a bad temper. So this was a munitions grade sword, and this side of the blade, which I can mark with this, it's on the same side as the stitching, holds a good edge, and I cut wonderfully with it, and the tip holds a good edge. And so that one weak spot right there, it's just not that much to really worry about in this case, and the sword was quite a bit discounted. But I'm fairly sure that the bad spot is because of the heat treat. And this sword, the blade edge behaves similarly to the bad heat treat part of that. So first, I want to show, I don't know if you can see that the handle is twisted. Okay. Now I'm tucked into the corner here. But I'm going to try to show that I've bent and re-bent back the blade. You might have been able to see it there, maybe not. But the blade is not straight. So it bends particularly right about here a lot, but I've been bending it back. But that's where the fuller ends. So at the fuller, it gets quite a bit thicker right here, so it seems to want to bend right there. And it can bend pretty dramatically. So, I mean, I can probably bend it. I can't bend it like that, but I can probably bend it with two hands, but if you hit something with it, it bends for sure. And even though I've sharpened the blade, all I can really cut with it is thin plastic water bottles, like this. These will cut. I can really cut these all day. These will not cut, and they bend the sword dramatically. So the handle is twisted, and I think that's because the wood core is smashed on the inside, and the tang can twist inside of the wood core because the wood core just gave out. So I don't know if they didn't use as hard of a wood as might be historically accurate, or if it just would never come up if the sword and stuff didn't bend quite so much, if it was sharp enough to cut water bottles. But it just won't stay sharp. And I recently tried to file sharpen some of my swords, including this one, and of them, the Balor Arms sword, let me point at it, cuts with the file sharpen because it makes a toothier edge. This one does not. And in fact, I can sit here like this and I can dull this blade. It does have some spots that cut a little better, and then I can cut with them. But overall, with how much metal I'm sitting on, which isn't that much, but I think it's more than adequate. And then, more to the story, is I have this sword, which is a windlass, and the temper is good on this one. And there is not that much metal there. And a bad cut doesn't bend the sword. I mean, there's a chance that that tang is bending a little bit right at the tang. I've had a lot of swords that bend right at the tang, just ever so slightly, but not like this other one. So my problem is I want a saber like this. Cold Steel has one for like $700. Windlass has some sabers that are about like this. There is the 1860 light cavalry saber, Union light cavalry saber, but it's not on Cult of Athena. It's only on museum replicas. But additionally, I'm not ready to buy a saber right now, so I'm kind of trying to wait until I find the right saber, and then it's the right time for me to make a sword purchase, because of course a sword purchase is kind of like not every day. So I'm not unhappy with my universal sword saber, and decoratively it's just as good as new. I mean, a little bit of twisting, you know what I mean? It looks battle hardened, if anything. And the price is low. I mean, $150 brand new, full price. But, you know, I would really like another Universal Swords, but I'm not confident in the steel. Because Universal Swords is making a ton of swords that are very clearly aimed at two markets. One of them is the reenactor market, and they don't even sharpen their swords, and they don't use them, and if they do, it's on a watermelon or something. And the other market is fakes, because anybody who wants a real sword is probably not buying them for the most part. But you can antique these to look very genuine, and they have the stamps and stuff like that. Well, different swords have, but this one doesn't have any stamps. But sometimes I look at antiques and I think that doesn't look like an antique. That looks like a replica that was antiqued. So what this video is about is, can you tell me if I will get a universal sword of the 5160 steel, will it compete with a windlass? Because this is cutting plastic bottles. Any plastic bottle I've tried so far. I haven't tried any of the big, heavy, thick ones, but I mean, I've had some big, heavy, thick ones that put a katana down. So plastic can get really thick and heavy. Because if I can buy a 5160 Universal Swords saber, then I might be able to meet my needs of Mountain Dew bottles all day, even if they bad cut it doesn't bend the sword for the price of a universal sword? Or do I need to order from museum replicas and try to get a windlass? Because the windlass sword I have, actually, they're hit and miss, for one thing. Because the heat treat is bad a lot. And then there's dull spots all over the sword. And that's no good. Or do I have to get a cold steel, which is expensive because all of their cheap sabers are really heavy? Or do I need to look elsewhere? A lot of people that I've emailed that make swords that I like say they can't make a saber because you can't make the hilt. Making those hilts, you have to cast a mold, you have to get a mold, you have to make a mold, you have to cast the hilt. It's a different thing, and Universal Swords is the one who is invested in the hilts. They just don't have the blade. Or, and I have one more question. This is a windlass dueling saber, but it's the blunt one. And it's the training saber, the Hutton training saber. And so my question is, can I sharpen it and expect it to get a good edge? Because if I sharpen it and the edge sloughs off like a bad heat treat edge, which it might be because it will be springier, it might be a better training saber if it hasn't, if you don't need to make it hold an edge. If I do that, I will ruin the sword. As it is right now, it is a stock training saber, and there's value in that because I can use it, and it's safe, pretty safe. Still a little bit edgy, even though it's kind of thin, but it's light, so it's not sharp, so it's pretty safe, and there's no tip. If I sharpen it, will it make a very nice light saber that is sharp and cuts plastic bottles very well without needing to be resharpened all the time? Or is that not going to work? I emailed someone, maybe Windlass directly, and they did not recommend that I sharpen a training saber. But I do not know if they've just mean that one's not for that, so it's dangerous if you sharpen it. I don't know. I wish that I could just get a universal sword and choose one of the models that's in 5160, but I don't want to get another sword. Oh, that when I have a bad cut on a Mountain Dew bottle, it folds into an S, like that little GIF where they hit the 2-liter with the fake katana, and the katana goes, "Rah!" So try to put that bending into that video, but it's just I have the wrong backdrop. But you can see it for sure. But I'm really familiar with it, and there's a lot of optical illusion going on, so it's just hard to feel confident that you're going to be able to see it. But I've bent it back. It was much more dramatic. You can see it right there, and it's also bent right here, and it's also bent, and then the handle is all twisted. I mean, it's probably not going to break, but it doesn't cut. Okay, thank you very much.